everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lyrical Psychology. I'm Coach Erica L. Reynolds.
And I'm Coach Dominique Currington.
All right, Coach Dominique Currington. We have a special episode today, don't we?
Yes, we do.
I'm very excited about it. Today, we're going to honor our fathers, and we have some tear jerking moments. We have some moments of celebration, but we're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about dynamics in the father child relationships too. And it's all in the lyrics. We're getting it all from the lyrics too as an inspiration. I'm excited to get going on this episode today. You're going to want to make sure that you stay through the whole thing. So, Coach, you've
Yes,
picked a very special song to honor your father today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
sure. I feel like it's a classic. It's Count on Me by Whitney Houston and CeCe Winans. And I feel like vocally, both CeCe Winans and definitely Whitney Houston, they are unmatched. And I think that when their vocals came together on this song, it just did something. And then the words just really resonated with me. And so I picked this song. And of course, it does remind me of my relationship with my father.
Mhm.
So you want to get into it?
Let's get
Coach?
into it. I can't wait.
All right. I'm just going to really focus on just the chorus because it's the chorus that's really impactful for me and just the first few lines of the chorus. Of course, count on me through thick and thin, a friendship that will never end. And so this particular lyric just really resonates with me because it speaks to the relationship I have with my father. Coach has never actually met my father, but she's seen pictures of my father and myself, and she says that's your twin, and everybody says that that is definitely my twin, and not just from a physical aspect, but also from a personality aspect. And I think I have inherited the great part of his personality, and unfortunately, probably the bad part as well. But that's why we understand each other so well. So I won't divulge too much information in regard to that, but I'll stick to the lyrics. And when I think about counting on someone through thick and thin, I think about my father being a friend. Of course, he was an awesome father to me and my siblings, but he was actually a friend to me in more ways than one. And one story that I want to share with you guys that kind of depicts him being a friend to me is back in, let's say, 2014, when I found out that I was actually pregnant for the second time, just a little shy of a year of giving birth to a stillborn baby. So, ideally, this was a difficult time for me because I didn't want to necessarily be pregnant so soon after that traumatic experience. I was still going through the motions. And then I found myself alone, pregnant for the second time. And so motherhood was something that I did want, but maybe not under those circumstances. And it was hard for me to go back and tell my father that I was pregnant yet again. But even when I told him, he didn't shun me away, he didn't judge me. He made me feel that I was not alone in the situation, that I had a friend. And so, more so, I was concerned about me living 2.5 hours away from my support system, which was my mother and father at the time, or just my immediate family, and me being unsure of daycare. I'm sure you ladies have been in that situation where you have a new child and you're concerned about daycare, you're concerned about support. And just imagine doing that as a single mother, because even being inside of a relationship, that can be of concern to you. And so
Mhm.
when I told my father, he said, "Don't worry, that baby's going to be right here in New Orleans with me and your mother." And he didn't just speak those words, he stood on those words. And as you guys would say, he stood on business. He definitely did. He showed up and he showed out. And although we were miles apart, my daddy always checked in on me. He always made me feel supported, always made me feel loved, and he gave me everything I needed in that pregnancy to see it through to the end, which the end came a little prematurely, I must say, because my baby girl, if you guys know her, she's never really been all that compliant. And it showed up even early on than what you guys would think. She came a whole month early. She was supposed to be actually born on September 11th, 2015, but she was born on August 11th, 2015. And so I called my father and my mother. I actually had them on the call at the same time. And I had to tell them that, hey, my water had broken on August 10th, 2015. And so it was about maybe roughly 7 o'clock at night. I was being driven to the hospital, so to speak, by Fate's aunt and telling them the details. And my mom and dad, they're a bit older. They were much younger back then. Sorry, guys. But they still didn't like to travel on the road at night. But my dad didn't hesitate. He and my mom packed up and they got on the road with my niece and they drove 2.5 hours just to be by my side. And my dad was the person who stayed in the hospital room from the beginning until the end, with the exception of when I had to push, because I guess some things are still off limit for a dad, if you guys can understand that. But from the moment in which Fate was cleaned off and handed back to me, my dad was there to witness that particular story, and he stayed here in Lafayette with me. He did travel back to and from my apartment to the hospital, but he was right there with me the whole time. And just his presence, like, it was very powerful. It gave me strength because I was still apprehensive and nervous, even though they say that African American baby girls have the highest success rate when it comes to them being premature, like they fare well. And just as God would have it, all praises to the Most High, my baby didn't spend one night in the NICU. She was right there with me and her grandfather the entire time, except she spent one night in the nursery because I wanted to rest. But outside of that, she was just right there with us the whole entire time. And I could see that not only had my father stole my heart, because I felt like up until that time I was the apple of his eye, but I know once he laid eyes on that baby girl of mine, people say, "Are you ready to be replaced?" But I was okay with it. But it seemed like when their eyes met, they were inseparable from that moment on, because she was his shadow and she still is until this day. And so that's just one story I have about my dad and how he was just a friend to me through thick and thin. Even despite him not necessarily being okay with the circumstances or situation that I was in, he was still there for me. And so thank you, Dad, for that. Coach, you want to say something before I go on to the next part, or what you?
Yeah, I just want to say first off, that is a beautiful story.
Mhm.
Absolutely beautiful. And I want to just recognize, I know we're recognizing fathers, but coach, you skirted by it. You are a very strong woman.
Oh, thank
You're a
you.
very strong woman for you to have gone through that and the loss of your first child in that manner.
Mhm.
And then here's beautiful Faith. And I know you were scared when she's coming a month early, and dad was there.
Dad was there.
Daddy came and he said, "We're going to do this and we're going to be fine." I get choked up and she'll just,
Yeah, you making me cry. I got to get through the next part, Coach.
Coach, we want to see. It's beautiful. And you're so
Mhm.
blessed to have what a man, what a
Yeah,
father in your life like that. And you're a strong woman, young lady. And I just want
thank
to
you.
make sure that we put that recognition out there too. I can only imagine. I don't want to. And you don't have a choice because you lived it. Just get more and more respect for you as I know you through these years. You're a
Yes.
force to be reckoned with. And
Yes.
okay, I'll stop there before I could go on and give her all her gold stars, but there's more
All
to tell
right.
you. Dad, your
Well,
dad
thank you,
sounds amazing.
Coach.
Yeah.
My strength doesn't come from me, it comes from God. Hey, so
Mm,
I got to give praise to him for that, Coach.
yeah.
But the next thing is the verse where she says, "I know sometimes it seems as if you're standing here alone, but we'll get through this." And another situation I could recall myself being in was back in maybe 2022. So I was on the final leg of my doctoral level journey in my dissertation, but I was finding it quite hard to recruit 10 women. You would think that would be easy, right? 10 women. They had to meet certain inclusion criteria, of course. But I strategically made sure that I didn't do a quantitative dissertation and did a qualitative so I could meet that small number of women, right? And so, typical me fashion, I sometimes get frustrated. And so I call my dad because he's a source of not only comfort, but he always listens and he gives me advice. He can be philosophical at times. Like sometimes I call him for advice and he goes into long stories and he tells stories inside of stories and I get lost, but then he brings it back full circle. And so I
Wait,
appreciate
so you're
him.
used to that. You're used to that because I know I just now it sounds like you're describing me. Okay.
But sometimes I call him just like, "Dad, I just want you to listen. I don't want a philosophical story today." But even if I don't find utility in it in that moment, I can find myself in a situation in the near future or maybe far off, and I recall those things that he said to me. And
Mm,
so sometimes messages do come to us prematurely. We're not ready to receive it, or we're not even sure why we're listening to that. But God always knows. And so in those instances, I'm grateful that he did tell me certain messages, even if I wasn't all that receptive to it. But going back to what I was saying, this particular time I was venting because I was scared, I was nervous, and I was actually a little bit angry or maybe livid. I probably was a little past angry, but I had invested so much time, so much money, so much effort going to school, working at a busy job, a high level job, overseeing my child, taking time away from parenting her, feeling guilty because I can't spread myself thin enough. And here I am on the last leg, and I don't even know if I'm going to graduate because I can't recruit 10 women. And so my dad just said, he listened to me and he just said this, and it was so succinct. It was succinct and it was just touching at the moment. He just basically said, he said, Dominique, this is going to be a journey of completion, not a journey of abandonment for you.
Mm,
And I sat with that and I said, thank you for that. Because those words somehow they spoke life into me in a moment where I wanted to give up. But it fueled me to keep going. And as God would have it, I graduated in 2023, February 2023, and I got my doctorate. And so God sent women my way. And it was women who I hadn't even really thought would come my way, but God opened up doors. But it was my dad's words that fueled me to look in other avenues and not give up or go into doubt and say, woe is me. And so I thank my dad for that particular situation. And he was there for me because during that time, I would say that was a rough time or a rough period in my life. And so it's just moments like that. I have a myriad of other moments that I can share, but those are the ones that just really stick out to me. And so thank you, Dad. Sorry I'm crying on here looking crazy, but
no,
hopefully you get touched by this story because that's what you do to me. So I have. Yes.
this is probably one of the more heartfelt
Yeah.
stories that you shared, both of them. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
crying inside, trust me. I'm sitting here being stoic, but I'm just like my heart right
Uh,
now. What a beautiful testimony to what fatherhood should look like, what fatherhood can look like when you prioritize the needs, the feelings, just really your God given, because men have intuition too, your
they do.
God given intuition on how to love your child.
Mm,
You said he knew the right word to say or the right phrase and just said it.
yeah, he do.
This is going to be a journey of completion. We're going to add that. We need to add that to our merch, our shirts, coach. But that's amazing. And put his name there. That's amazing. And you finished it. And
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dominique Currington has her
Yeah.
father to thank her, who's been a coach father to her as
Yes.
well. Beautiful
Yes.
story.
He put me back in the game. I wanted to abandon the game, but he said no. He says keep going. And in so many words, that's his way of saying keep going because to me, abandonment was a choice. Giving up too early or shy of your breakthrough. And we see that replicate or resurface in a lot of different aspects of our lives. And so maybe that might touch somebody. You might be on the brink of giving up, abandoning your dreams, abandoning your goals, maybe thinking like the path that God has made plain for you to walk down. You feel like maybe it's time for you to change course because it's getting hard. But I
Mhm.
want you to stick with it, go through it. Because just as though I was going through that moment, I imagine that my life would have been much different had I abandoned that journey and not made in one of completion and chose the other route. And so that's what I have to say about it.
Moment of silence for the
Mm-hmm.
profoundness and the
Mm-hmm.
impact. I think that it's a perfect example of just how important fathers are. And all of this happened years ago. How old is Faith now?
Faith is 9, she'll be 10 in August.
So Faith will be 10 in August. And you graduated with your doctorate in 2023.
3, 2 years ago.
And here we are in 25. And it's like it was yesterday in both incidences, the way that you tell the story, the way it shows that it still impacts you. The point is, there's nothing like the love of a parent, and for a girl, that love of the father.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. I can understand why you chose that song.
Yeah. I love that song. I feel like we could have probably, maybe I didn't do it justice with those two verses, but that's what stuck out to me. But I feel like the whole entire song is just filled with touching lyrics, to be honest. Yeah.
See, I'm hearing it in my head. When you are weak, I will be strong, helping you to carry on. Call on
Mm-hmm.
me, I will be there. Don't be afraid. Please believe
Mm.
me when I say you can
Count
count
on
on
me.
me. Oh,
Don't be afraid. Like, how many times have we been? I'm borrowing your segue into getting deeper. How many times?
how
You
many
know,
times?
yeah, coach, how many times have we been in those situations where we are afraid to ask for help because you said like you're a strong person, but what does strong look like? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how have we defined strong in our
Mm-hmm.
society? And how has holding on to that definition of strong, how has it hindered us? In specific to our gender, but also in specific to our race. Because sometimes we're prideful in moments when we should be asking for help, but we don't even understand that we don't have to bear the burdens of life. Obviously, we don't have to bear the burdens of life by ourselves because we have God. But then God also sends help through other people
Absolutely.
and resources. But sometimes I can do it by myself, but it can be much easier if we do it together. And I'm just grateful that I have a support system, not just in the form of my father, but in the form of my mother, my immediate family, extended family. And what I'm learning in this stage of my life is in the form of friends, in the form of
Mm-hmm.
mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just happy to be blessed with that because that's a blessing because not everybody has that. Some people are actually alone where they're not afraid to ask for help, but they can't because there's nobody to for them to ask for that help. So thank God that's not my story.
And strength and help really don't have anything to do with each other. I know that the narrative it often puts it together as if you're asking for help or you can't do it yourself, then you're not strong, you're weak. That's not true. To get strong, even to lift weights, you need help of a trainer or somebody to spot you as the weight gets heavier. There's help involved in that for you to get stronger. You had to
Mm-hmm.
learn that from somebody as far as how many reps to do, how many times, what are the muscles you have to work. It didn't just come to you necessarily in your mind. You're only weak when you don't do it because you're
Mm-hmm.
not able to work that muscle. And so help often gets us to the next point. And
Mm.
the fact that we persevered is what makes us strong. You're
I
on the
love
other
that.
end of it.
You all know the end.
So that
Coach, I
shows
like it.
strength to go on the other end, and it shows strength to keep going even after that and to be successful through that is what strength is. And to be able to be vocal about it and say, this happened to me, and yet I stand. And I
Mm.
thank the good Lord. That's strength.
I love that, coach. Like you summed that up beautifully. That's what it is the perseverance. Asking for help doesn't impede upon your perseverance when your strength, your agility to see things through from one end or one point to the next point. Coach, I think I've cried enough. I've said enough.
Oh, and I'm all
Hopefully,
just like, oh, what a touching story. And I think it's fitting. I do think that fathers, they deserve all of the kudos when they do for people to know what they've done and how special they are as
mhm.
well. I think that there's not enough of that out there. Very good. Very
Very
good.
good,
Woo.
coach.
Gotta
All right,
get it out,
coach.
get out of that one, coach. That was deep. That was deep.
Yeah,
And we're so grateful you shared that story.
an
Okay.
original song. But I know that you have a special song that you want to share with us as well that speaks to you. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I do, coach. Just a little bit about my Father's Day contribution. My father was not a part of my life. I am the youngest of six kids. There were six of us, and my parents were divorced, and we didn't see him every day, and he lived in another state. And so, one thing I've through the years, and I've had people who were father figures to me, like a brother in law or other my close friends, their fathers, or things of that nature. And so, I definitely have the respect of that father figure. And I was super always super glad to see the beauty and the fatherhood of my friends' fathers, and even like some of my really good friends who became fathers. I'm really always just very impressed and just taken aback at how beautiful they handle that job of fatherhood. So I've definitely been able to appreciate and know the importance of fathers. But the song that I chose touches on what many go through when it comes to those father child relationships. And it's called The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics. So this song was written by these two artists who had troubled relationships with their dad. And they decided to co-write this song together that speaks on it. And so I'll start with a couple of lines from the beginning of the song that really will give some insight as to why this touched me. Because I know that there are these relationships that can sometimes be complicated. I thought this song was perfect. So in this first verse, it starts off with every generation blames the one before, and all of their frustrations come beating on your door. I know that I'm a prisoner to all my father held so dear. I know that I'm a hostage to all his hopes and fears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years. And he's saying it every generation, there may be some issues when it comes to that relationship and the father and the child. And it's so complicated because as children, we weren't there in our father's lives for their childhood. We weren't there in their upbringing or their life's experiences until we were. And unfortunately, what shaped them, right, is we get them by what already shaped them before we were introduced to them. And us not understanding that, all that we know is that this is my father. They're supposed to be there, like Coach said earlier, at the hospital for me or giving me that call and all these things. And I'm not making excuses of why they don't, but the ones that don't do that, there are some that just really, maybe they mean, or they just can't quite get it together because of whatever they're battling. And so just using more of our grace towards them and understanding that they have their own past. They don't have a manual for how to do this. Yes, we do have expectations of them. I'm not giving any kind of pass for absentee fathers or people that don't do it, but I just think that when you have an understanding, or you're able to find some sort of understanding, that it could help you, because we carry that. We carry those things when they're not there. We carry that in resentment and maybe the bad behaviors and, oh, it's their fault or this fault. So the more that you're able to understand why this may be the behavior they're choosing or what they're doing, then the more you're able to tackle it a different way. I think, and this song speaks to that. So in the song, he's talking about his dad trying to explain some stuff to him, and it makes sense to him as his dad is saying. It makes sense to the father as the dad is saying it, but they're not in agreement. So it says, you say you just don't see it. He says it's perfect sense. You just can't get agreement in this present tense. We all talk a different language, talking in defense, right? So we're speaking this different language because to him, the father, and everything he's been through and whatever's gone on, this makes sense. It's like, don't you get why I did this? So this is many times, if you've been absent from your father and you see them a while, they want to explain to you where they've been and why that happened. It's all you know is that you were this kid they weren't there for. I don't care. You should have taken care of what you put on this earth. And you're talking past each other, because that's not the conversation that's going to get you to that next level. So why have this conversation, right? And the chorus, it goes into say it loud, say it clear. You can listen as well as you hear. It's too late when we die to admit that we don't see eye to eye. Okay. So while both parties may want to get their word across, their thing that they're doing, it's okay to listen just as much as you're talking. And let's be clear, and let's say it loud. Let's say how we feel. Let's say what we really want. And let's really listen to each other. And in this song later on, the dad does wind up passing away. So here's some reflection that the artist had. Again, true story for them around this. So he says, this is skipping towards the end. He says, I wasn't there that morning when my father passed away, I didn't get to tell him all the things I had to say. I think I caught his spirit later that same year. I'm sure I could. I'm sure I heard his echo in my baby's newborn tears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years. And there's that regret, right? There's the father passes away. Time goes on. You begin to have your children and you start to think about some of those conversations you had, or you start to think about your father's life and the decisions that he made, and whether you agree with it or not, it gives you different understanding. And now that you understand it, he's transitioned and you're not able to say it to him there. So the chorus comes back to say it loud, say it clear, all of that. And the reason that this song resonates with me from what I told you earlier is because not having that relationship with my dad. And I remember that he came to visit in 1994. And I was 16 years old and going on 17. And he came to visit everybody and it was great. And that was in May. And I hadn't seen him in I don't know how many years. And so we talked a little bit, but we didn't get into anything. I didn't really have any resentment towards my dad, I'll be honest with you, because I know that he loved my mother a great deal. They were college sweethearts. I just felt that this was life. This is what we were dealt with. And I'm not going to sit here and harbor something for someone that I really don't even know. And so I know that's not a normal way to look at it. I have siblings. They were in the same house as me. They knew him more because they were older when my parents were together, or they had different expectations. I know one of my brothers, it was very difficult for him to get over the fact that my dad wasn't involved, and he was very resentful towards that. But I never let it carry me. I always thought about whatever the decisions he made, my mom made, whatever it was, they dealt with what they dealt with. And that's their life and their business. But here's what I'm dealing with right now in my life. So I always had that understanding for some. And I thank God for that. I'll say some strange reason, but I thank God for that kind of discernment around that situation. So fast forward, though, after seeing him in May, after years, after not seeing him and then seeing him again in May, he passed away September of that same year. And I remember it was Labor Day. And we were celebrating. I had friends that were coming to get me, and we were all together as a family. And we got the news and that. And I really didn't understand and know how I felt about it. And so I remember one of my good friends picked me up, and she was just like, I told her what happened. And she's like, why are you here in the car? My father passed away. But again, this is someone that I didn't really know. But she's like, so I didn't have resentment. And I also didn't have this great amount of grief either. Not to mention and bring up another artist, but it was like Tupac. But he passed away, but I couldn't cry because my anger wouldn't let me feel for a stranger, even though I didn't have anger towards him, but I understood those lyrics like that, right? So anyway, that's what went on. So when I think about it as I grow older, I think about it, it did impact me. One person who was responsible for me being here on this earth, other than God himself and my mom, is gone. You're going to feel that a certain way, and that's your father. So as much as I may have put up this block of protection, maybe it was of, I'm good, that was their thing, they did that, it doesn't bother me. You really can't help but for it to impact you in that sense when you start thinking about it. And there are things that I wish I could have said to him had he still been here. And he's not, he's been gone for quite some time. And so I think about this song really resonates. And I think that when we look at our relationships with our fathers, and there's so many people that are still going through some trying times and separation or with resentment and older, whatever it is, you don't have all day. You don't have all year. You don't know when this whole thing cuts out. My dad passed away when he was 46 years old. Okay. Time is not promised to us. And it's foolish. And I'm not trying to judge or put anyone down, but to not attempt to resolve if both parties are willing, because you've got all this caught up stuff from the past. And he said, she said, and there are things, there's a way to deal with that. There are mediations that you can be a part of to talk through those things. I'm a mediator, I know, but you can also just connect on the fact that you both want love from each other. Okay. And I think Maya Angelou said it best, I believe this was her, that every parent isn't built to be a parent to young kids, and sometimes they're better parents to older. And I know it's, you shouldn't have kids, we're going to have our judgment and all these things, but the reality is it is what it is. My father had a relationship still with one of my older sisters. She'd pick up the phone, she'd call him, he'd be there. They had a better relationship, and she was more of a grown person, adult. And there was no resentment on them. They were able to develop that. And so I want you all to think about it. For those who are having strained relationships with their fathers or any parent, I want you to think about, is it better or easier for you to have a relationship with them now that you are older? And that means letting go of the they weren't there for this and that. New times and fun times can make up for things that we weren't there for before. We got to let that go and accept it and get to know them. And another thing is, we have this, I know it's father is supposed to do this or the parent is supposed to do that. Do you know that you have the right and the opportunity to really define what that relationship is? And not if it's toxic for you. I'm not talking about those, but I'm saying there are some relationships that are still strained because of miscommunication and resentment, when really, if they got past that, they could really just love on each other and mend it and take it for what it is. You have the ability to redefine whatever that relationship needs to look like, the two of you. But it is something that's worth it. It is, if both are willing. And it is something that I encourage others to do. So anyway, Coach, this song to me, I just thought that was, it's another take. We celebrate the fathers, we appreciate them, but everybody has a different situation. And I think that for those who may have had some alternative experiences, that this is a good song to encourage mending, or even just getting and letting go of some of that stuff. Because as much as you want to point the finger at that other person and he didn't do this, he didn't do that, you're really sacrificing your own happiness, your own understanding, and getting through some of your own barriers because you're not working through it properly. So that's what I chose. The song did that for me. What are your thoughts, Coach?
Coach, I just want to applaud you because I feel like in the depiction that you gave us, or a description of you and your father's relationship, should I say, it's a big deal that you were able to operate from a place where you didn't harbor ill feelings or ill intent towards your father. Because a lot of people, when they grow up without their father, they can't get past abandonment issues, and it carries on to their adulthood years, and it somehow destroys relationships maybe that they have with their kids or just people in general, right? They don't maybe allow themselves to fully love. They don't invest a whole lot of time into things that will pay off for them just because they are afraid of the what ifs behind it. And so I applaud you for being able to
Thank
have
you.
a strong degree of emotional intelligence, even at a young age, to not hold that against your father. And I love what you said about allowing, in so many words, allowing people chances and opportunities and understanding their story. A lot of people are birthed into trauma, and you have the opportunity once you are an adult to choose different paths. You can choose to either live a life that is consistent with the trauma that you've experienced, or you can choose to be the person to break the generational curses and say that, yeah, I experienced it and it was an experience, but it taught me what I should not do or what I should not subject others to. And with that being said, sometimes, it takes a real great person to be that person who breaks those curses, and not all of us are able to do. And so just understanding that and understanding people's story goes a long way, because it helps you with being able to forgive them and opening your heart to have a relationship with someone who may not have done right by you all of your life, but you still have access to them as long as they're here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talk about living life without regrets, but it's mostly in terms of, okay, trying things,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing adventures. But I want to challenge people to live life without regrets when it comes to relationships,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be platonic relationships or even familial relationships as well. It's important that we live life without regrets because it's really a hard pill to swallow when you're at a funeral or you get word of someone passing away. And even if you weren't on the best of terms during that time, you can live with so many regrets. I wonder if they died, wondering if I loved them or if I cared
Mhm.
about how could I have savored the time that I had with them to change the dynamics of our relationship in the present. And if you're analytical like us, those two things that I talked about can go on forever because you can come up with so many different other things that you can or routes you can explore as to live within that moment of regret, so to speak. And so, with that being said, cherish people while they're here. Unforgiveness is going to be the antecedent to you being bitter. And even if you feel like it's good for you to keep a distance from that person because you don't know how you might react, just harboring onto that bitterness is just affecting the quality of life and the quality of relationships you have overall because you're not fully present and able to embrace moments in which you should be overly ecstatic because even if you're bitter towards someone, it's showing up in other avenues of your life. So sometimes forgiveness is, it should be for the other person, but sometimes it's for you. If you look at it from a selfish perspective, which sometimes we have to, what's in it for me? It helps you, it helps everyone in the process. And so if people are willing, like you said, to come to a middle ground and let bygones be bygones, give people a second, third, and maybe before chance. After all, God gives us chances. And that's what I took from it. But I thought that was an awesome depiction of fatherhood, so to
Mhm.
speak, from the other side of things. How many people are left starving without having a father. But I felt like how you explained it and put it into those words was really good. And it's a call to action. If you still have your father here and you have a strained relationship with them, time is of the essence. No one's guaranteed tomorrow. So make sure that you capitalize on those moments that you do have and make the best of it. And I don't know what that looks like. It may look different from person to person, even if that's talking to your father every 2 to 3 months. At least give him the opportunity. Just hear his voice, hear him out, hear their story.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Thank you, Coach, for sharing. It's real, and it's about just mending these relationships. But I want everyone to consider something. Remember, I said that every father isn't meant to be a father or a dad. And you're like, they shouldn't have. There's a lot of things we shouldn't have done, and you were able to be forgiven for it or moved on. And I know this is a big one, it's a whole person, but I'm just saying, as someone who grew up in this way, I feel I can say this. And depending on their background, depending on those generational curses and things that they carry, did you really want that to be carried on to you and then your
Hmm.
family and things of that nature? What are you really resenting at this point? That have you thought about maybe they weren't there because they didn't want to do that to you because they knew who they
Hmm.
were and they knew that they tried to live better and they couldn't fight it, or they were
Hmm.
scared to ruin you, and so
Hmm.
maybe that's why they did that. And again, I'm not making excuses, but I want us to have more consideration and thoughts about this because, in all due respect, we grew up better because my father wasn't there in
Hmm.
comparison to the life that he had. And I'm not judging or knocking anyone, but my understanding is he even said that. I knew y'all would do better if I wasn't in your life. He told that to my siblings. And so on the one end, as my brother is was upset and cursing the ground he walked on and all these things because he wasn't there, you didn't want that life because you sure wouldn't have had the one that you had
Yeah.
or the opportunities you had. So I think that's important. So when I say, is this a lack of love of why we may have these absentee fathers or all of these things going on? No, not 1 minute, whether he was there or not, could you tell me that my father didn't love me. I always knew that because that's common sense. Your fathers love you, but maybe that's how they love you, is because they want to protect you. And that's why, if you're older, in those situations that I'm speaking of, you could more likely have a relationship that is healthier, that is defined on some different terms, and they can show you that love. And then people grow and they change. Sometimes they've had traumatic incidences to where they've been like, you know what, I messed up and I did this wrong. And I hope that you allow me in your life, and let them be a better grandfather to your children. I got so much joy watching. My mother was there. You've heard the Mother's Day story, but I'm saying some of the things that we always feel we didn't have because she was busy. There's so much joy in seeing her do all of that and more for my daughter. I received so much joy from that. You and your father could mend this situation and embrace the fact that he can be this better grandfather to your kids. And y'all are now experiencing all these things together. So just know love comes in different forms. Sometimes it's protection, but we need grace and we need consideration and compassion, because none of us are without fault. Some of us have done some really bad things, and we hope and pray people give us second and third chances for it. And for those fathers out there who are in this situation and you don't know how to get started or reach out, just be you vulnerably. Speak it. Speak on the love you want. Speak on the relationship that you want. But make sure that you are following up in the proper actions if you're going to put yourself out there to try to mend that. Okay, Coach.
Coach, I don't have anything else to say. You just summed it up in a nutshell. I think that was powerful, and that someone out there needed to hear it, if not multiple people, because sometimes you can't come out shooting without any regard to someone's feelings. Because even an absentee father is still a human being. Absolutely. And so I love how you package that message, because it's a gentle way of giving them a push that they may need to step up, because being a father is important, but how you parent is of equal or even more importance as well. And sometimes if you're not able to give your daughter or your son or, your children what they need in the moment, absenteeism may be the best thing for them in that situation, because you might hinder them in more ways than one by allowing them to grow up in a toxic relationship. And I think about the adage, which we usually often use for romantic relationships, right? If you love something, let it go.
I thought that, yeah.
And it comes back to you, then you know that it's so. Why can't that hold true for a relationship, a parental relationship? You don't look at it like that, but that's what I took from what you were saying. It could very well hold true for that. Thank
Coach,
you.
We're right here. When I was saying it, I thought that same thing.
Yeah.
So look, it had to come out. So thank you, Lord. He gave it to you. It's like, I told you to say this. Thank you. That's right. Because it's so meaningful. But anyway, I know we're going on, and we can have more songs and conversations about family dynamics and lyrical psychology, but this is about Father's Day. So you heard the two versions here, right? Of the dedication. It was Coach Dominique, and she gave the touching story about her father and how he was there for her in the most vulnerable moments and times she needed him, and really exemplified true fatherhood. And then you had me, where we talked about the living years, where in those alternative situations it may not always look like that, but it doesn't mean we have to stay there. And so as long as we're here and we're breathing, there's always an opportunity for something, and whatever it is. And if you try it and it doesn't work, like Coach said, then and it is what it is. But give each other grace and give each other time to be that. And the best form of an apology is changed behavior. Okay. All right, Coach.
I love that.
All right. Sounds good. Thank y'all for tuning in. We love y'all, and we look forward to seeing you. And I think, Coach, you had something to say about our merch. They need to visit our store, right?
Oh, yes. Please visit our It's Lyrical merch store. We have all sorts of different items that's branded accordingly. And we also have some of our clever sayings that we on our merch as well. So if you guys like us, you support us, you're a part of the community, please don't hesitate to shop at our merch store, and we'll have some items. You should see some items here on the screen. All right. So go ahead and copy your merch because it's hot. All right, we done. So we're signing off now.
Okay, we're signing off. All right.
I
See you
know.
later.
All right.
Thanks for tuning
All
in.
right. Till next time.